To start with, I'm Andrew. I'm the program strategist at Accelerate Okanagan. We're an accelerator in Kelowna, covering the whole Okanagan Valley. The session this morning is called Building for the Global Marketplace, Lessons in Transformation. We're going to hear from a few different speakers this morning, pretty diverse, and we'll let them do the talking, not me. So hopefully you're enjoying day two. If you missed any sessions, there are videos of all the sessions available in the Tech Summit library, and it'll be in your inbox later this week. Over the next couple hours, we'll talk about digital transformation. Basically, the message here is that technology is transforming industries, businesses, governments, communities, basically impacting everything these days. We used to think of technology as a vertical sector, and now technology is just impacting everything. In the Okanagan, in our experience, just a few small examples, like we're seeing technology changing things like dentures, like upsetting the denture industry, who knew? And the fish food industry. We have a company in the Okanagan like turning shrimp from the lake. Who knew there were shrimp in the lake? Turning that into fish food and literally turning that industry upside down using some technology they invented. So pretty diverse sort of opportunities if you really take technology to the ends of where it can go and beyond. So we have a great lineup this morning. First of all, we're going to hear from Microsoft, then UBM, a global events company based in the UK. Got a great history of working with BC companies. Then we're going to hear from the Vancouver Airport Authority, as we all know it, YVR. And look at some really cool stuff at the end of the session here this morning, talking about artificial intelligence. So sort of like downstairs, if you were in the session this morning, I remind you to download the cool BC Tech Summit mobile app, and hopefully it works for you. We have about 2 hours for this session. This should end at, we're going to make this end at 12:30, whether we like it or not. But first up is Ryan Storgaard. Big thanks for Ryan for coming out for this event, as well as being the title sponsor from Microsoft.
As Geordie was mentioning, today the overall topic is building for the global marketplace, and this is going to be Microsoft lessons in transformation. And really, what I thought I would do today is originally I got asked, hey Ryan, could you come in and maybe share how a particular product at Microsoft has gone through digital transformation? And I started doing that, but actually I thought it would be more interesting and more instructive and helpful for you guys if I actually kind of zoomed out from the tree to see the forest, so to speak, and talk about how did digital transformation impact Microsoft itself as a company. So how did it impact our platforms, our products? I'll show you that for sure. But then also talk about, hey, we're going through a major transformation, have been for a while. What have we learned? And really at the end, what I'm going to try to do is give you guys a bit of a roadmap that we're using with our customers and partners and ourselves that'll help you kind of navigate digital transformation. So our mission this morning, I'm going to start just to baseline with everyone. I'm sure you guys have heard digital transformation a ton over the last 24 hours. So I'm not going to spend too much time, but I thought it'd be helpful just to make sure that we baseline a little bit on what we're talking about in terms of what digital transformation is doing in the industries, as Geordie was talking about. Then what I want to do is jump in and talk about digital transformation lessons at Microsoft. And really what I'll start with, to wake you guys up a little bit, is I'll show you some exciting things that have happened in terms of our platforms and our products around our vision for productivity in a digital-first world. And then I'll talk about how we've actually transformed inside the company, and then I'll wrap up with the roadmap. So just to kind of baseline us a little bit, what I actually did is I pulled in a few slides. They're probably about 1.5 years old from some talks that I was doing around internet trends. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about those just to refresh our memory and then kind of tee up digital transformation. So a couple years ago, I was using this slide just to talk about, hey, we're way beyond internet trends. One of the trends is disruption, which means fundamentally business model disruption. That's what we're seeing, coupled with industry trends. And the examples that I was talking about at the time were much more nascent, whereas I thought it was great yesterday. I mean, Tesla's here sharing incredible innovations and information on how they're continuing to disrupt many industries. Airbnb, Bitcoin, Uber. These are just normal now, but a couple years ago, we were kind of just trying to get our heads around, wow, these companies are disrupting and using technology and business model innovation in a very incredible, fast-paced way. Another one that was interesting is especially at Microsoft, we talk a lot about the PC, smartphone, and tablet market years ago, right? But really what this was talking about is, hey, when you think of Internet of Things and just internet-connected devices, it completely dwarfs what the PC, smartphone, and tablet market look like. Like, wow, that's an incredible amount of devices that are going to be generating an incredible amount of data. That kind of leads to and I'm sure you've all seen different versions of this, the explosion in data. If you've got all of these different devices that are generating tons and tons of data, it just quickly outpaces anything that we can actually deal with at a human level. You're just drowning in data. And what ends up happening is we need insights, we need artificial intelligence, we need machine learning to make sense of this data. So those were some of the internet trends. Oh, and sorry, the last one was kind of an invisible revolution. So again, this was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, but we're starting to see this be very commonplace now when you look at lots of different smart technologies, automation, car automation, all of these types of things, again, generating an incredible amount of data and insights. So that kind of tees up really what we're focused on here this week at the BCTECH Summit around digital transformation. And some of the things I know Julia White was talking about yesterday is we're seeing this as the #1 priority on our customers' agenda. And really, the title says it all. It's inevitable and mandatory. Like everybody is going through this. And if you're not, you will very likely be disrupted. One of the things that I couldn't help but kind of make bold in the bottom corner there was there's a stat around organizations, and I highlighted that are mature. You think of lots of people are using cloud computing and some of these different trends to save on operational costs. But if you have companies that are very mature in their digital transformation, where it's more holistic, and they're using a lot of these things in conjunction, that I'll show you more about in a second, 100 million plus more operating income than those that lag behind. So it kind of would make sense for us to want to be mature in how we're looking at digital transformation. The other one that I couldn't help but scribble on these is I don't have time to kind of share with you all these different data points, but I just thought I'd include it in the presentation that you guys can reference later. But a few themes really stood out to me when we looked at a bunch of these different stats. And I can say this definitely from a Microsoft perspective as well. The first one's really talking about, this isn't about technology. This is really fundamentally a cultural shift across people, processes, and technology like we've never seen before. That demands that we all need and require the right skills. So upskilling and technical skilling are of the utmost importance. And I love the point at the bottom here, whereas organizations don't transform, the people do. So that's where you see a lot of leadership principles. And in Microsoft, Satya has been talking a lot about a growth mindset. And everyone kind of needs to think about growth hacking, that type of entrepreneurial vision and innovation and R&D and just a fast-paced. People do that. People support that, but they use technology. That kind of leads to the second pillar, which is really talking about, hey, if we're going to go digital first to fast track a lot of innovation and cost savings, it fundamentally requires new skills, new processes to deal with the digital pace and speed. And finally, the last one is kind of what I was talking about earlier, the explosion of data. We're kind of drowning in it. We need help. We need automation and insights and assistance and bots. All of these things that are surging is because we really need a way to help technology make sense of the data, give us insights, and then be able to execute on those. The other one that I thought I'd include is that, this is really saying this is happening across many, many industries, and it's a huge opportunity. So from a Microsoft perspective, we're looking across all of these as well and seeing, hey, each one of these industries is spending heavily around digital transformation. How do we think about that? How would we enable? How would we support? How would we work with partners and our customers to really go after this? So if you kind of take a step back then and think about, okay, all of these things are happening, what are two fundamental questions that you can ask? One is thinking about, well, how is my business being digitally transformed? What are some of the capabilities and what are some of the technologies, people, processes, and so on? But the other one to think about is, how is your business model being digitally transformed? And one of the frameworks or a roadmap that we've been using at Microsoft with our partners and customers that I'll expand on a little bit shortly is really when you start thinking about digital transformation, there's kind of four major areas that you can actually take a look at. One is engaging with your customers, thinking about new ways to do this, and how can digital technology help you. That leads to transforming your products and your business models. That leads to optimizing your operations around those. And then finally, empowering your employees. But the big one that I really wanted to highlight is each of these areas is an area that you can focus in on. But the point is this is a continuous loop, right? That cuts across technology, people, and process. So I'll expand on this in a minute. So that's kind of just the backdrop of some of the trends, some of the digital transformation pillars and rationale behind it for what's driving it. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how has this impacted Microsoft. So with that, what I thought I'd do is show you really the vision. There's a video that I'm going to show you that came out a couple years ago, and it's our vision for the future of productivity. I thought productivity would be something that would be broadly applicable to folks. But I'd love for you to watch, as you watch the video, just see how many things that you see that are kind of, although they're futuristic, you can get an idea that they're fairly commonplace today and gives you a good sense for where we're going in a digital-first society. So That, like I said, that came out a couple years ago, and really the vision for it was, what do things look like on a further horizon? But then what I thought I'd do is just touch on a few things when you think of delivering on the vision. One of them is the office graph, so thinking about reinventing the way that we work and how all of the different identities and contacts, you think of the LinkedIn acquisition that we made recently, and how can we actually add things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and capitalize on a lot of these different connections is the office graph. The other thing that you saw us release recently is the Surface Hub. So in the video, you saw kind of ubiquitous computing and screens kind of everywhere. You're seeing Surface Hub as part of the realization of this. HoloLens, I don't know if you guys have seen the HoloLens demo. It's down on the second floor. But HoloLens in terms of augmented and virtual reality. Cortana in terms of a digital assistant and thinking about bots and how we can actually have helpful assistance. Cognitive services, these are APIs that we have in Azure around vision, speech, language, knowledge, and search. And how can we take that data and then do something intelligent or proactive with it? Machine learning, predictive analytics, and then finally Skype Translator. If you haven't tried out Skype Translator, it's amazing. So you can actually speak in English and then it'll translate real time in another language using a lot of artificial intelligence. So you can kind of get a sense for, hey, that was a vision for the future of productivity, and then here are some areas that we're delivering on that vision. Now, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how Microsoft itself as an organization was responding to digital transformation. And really, the first point I'd make is we continue to go through our own transformation. So several years ago, Forbes had an article about now every software is a software company. I thought the speaker yesterday from Tesla was a perfect example of that, and we're seeing that play out more and more and more. From last year, the article on the top left there, Satya talking about the cloud collaboration and constant transformation. That's just the pace that we need to be in from an organizational perspective. And then just last night, I grabbed this one, which is, we closed our acquisition of LinkedIn. So it's a constant, continuous transformation as a company for us. And what I like that Satya did right when he took over as CEO is he really established what's the Microsoft mission in this new world. What's the Microsoft mission? So our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Then we think about, well, how do we go about that? What's our worldview? And we fundamentally believe that mobility in terms of being tied to the person, not a device. So a ubiquitous mobile world that's also cloud first. How do we think about that? That's pure digital. Then we think about our strategy. This is typical Microsoft, right? This is our heritage. Build best-in-class platforms and productivity services for this mobile-first, cloud-first world. Now, that's all well and good, but what you might have heard Julia talking about is then we have the ambitions. What are we going to go and get done given all of that? And that's where we have reinvent productivity and business processes, build the intelligent cloud platform, and create more personal computing. What I did is mess up the slide a little bit, because what I wanted to show you guys in the bottom right-hand corner that you may not have seen, the way we've actually structured our P&L is around these three bold ambitions. So I think what a lot of people do is go, oh, that's a nice mission statement, or those are great ambitions for you, Microsoft. No, we're fundamentally built the company around these three things. And if you go and look at Microsoft's quarterly earnings, there's the Q2 FY17, you will actually see that's actually how we have structured our P&L. It's fundamentally how we're building the business. Now, when you think about that, I talked earlier about there's kind of 4 areas that you can help yourselves, and Microsoft also took a look at in terms of kind of having a roadmap for digital transformation. And each of these, the first one is engaging your customers. So how do we actually get much smarter and much more data, much more intelligent, much more empathy for designing and building products for our customers? How do we drive that engagement? Second one then is, how do we think about new ways to empower our employees? If we have all of this customer information and want to better serve our customers, the employees are typically the ones that are best able to do that. So how do we give them tools to help them collaborate and be more productive? The third one tends to get most of the attention. That's kind of what a lot of the cloud computing discussions were, which is optimizing your operations. But really what I'd get you guys to think about is more than just a line of business application or point solutions. How do you think about these things holistically? And again, in that feedback loop is really key. And then finally, how do these things transform your products? How can you transform your business model and the ways that you do business? So again, I thought I'd show you how at Microsoft we looked to align these things. So the bottom is really talking about, remember we set our P&L structure up on intelligent cloud, reinventing productivity and business processes, and more personal computing. Those are our bold ambitions. Those are our business units as well. Then on top of that, we really looked at, okay, there's a lot of horizontal scenarios that are happening out there. As you also saw earlier, there's a lot of very specific industry digital transformation. How do we think about that? And that's really in the middle there where our products and services, and then most importantly, our partners come in. There's no way that Microsoft's going to be able to meet the needs of all these different industries that are exploding around digital transformation. So how do we holistically think about our partners' products and services, and then also have a security-first mindset as we build all of these different things? And then finally at the top, it's how do we actually ourselves think about these 4 pillars? How can we work with our customers around these 4 pillars of digital transformation? And how can we work with our partners around these 4 pillars as well? So the last thing that I'll leave you guys with is there's a transformation roadmap that actually, I just took this straight from, there's a ebook that you guys can download. You can just go to enterprise.microsoft.com. Don't let the enterprise word fool you. It's really applicable for anyone. But really all I did is I took a screenshot out of there in the spirit of kind of so what, now what? Okay, Ryan, that's all well and good. What can I do after I leave this room to kind of dig into this a little bit more, just to consider this as a framework? And really you can download this ebook, and what it really talks about is it drills further into some of these themes that I've just briefly touched on. So the 4 themes are at the top, but then you start thinking about what are the business capabilities in each one of these pillars? What would be the technology enablers of those capabilities? And then you can actually do, if you get really sophisticated, you can kind of think of a maturity model around this. Where is my company or my organization or maybe my customer or partner lagging? Where are we adapting, maturing, and where do we feel we have a best practice? And really this is just a helpful tool to help kind of have some structure around where you're looking to innovate around some of these business transformations and technology. So with that, I'll pass it over. Thank you very much.
I'm Rebecca Evangelou. I am the EVP of Business Systems for UBM, and we are the world's 2nd largest events company. We are first in the United States. We do events much like this, and we do hundreds of them a year. We also do marketing, digital and print media products. We have over 70 offices in over 20 countries. Today, I'm going to tell you a story not about an innovative product, but how we use technology to change our operating model. So as Ryan was saying, the world is getting big with technology, but what we're learning as companies is getting complicated in the back of the office, right? It's getting hairy. So I'm going to tell a story about how we're taking technology to help us operate better, how we impact the bottom line, our ROI. Now, before I move into the story, I wanted to acknowledge, you might wonder why I'm at BCTECH Summit, because we don't have an office in Canada out of those 20 countries. But I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the talent that we found in BC. This is actually my secret weapon. There's a lot of technology here in BC, and they helped us achieve our objectives in our global company. I'd like to acknowledge, oh, where's my clicker? Is this the clicker? I don't even know. I'm going to try to click. Yeah? Okay, sorry, you guys. Okay, makers. So Imran Shatur, who's in the room, is the consultant. They do enterprise technology, marketing technology, and have been with us on this journey for all 4 years. So we tap into this Vancouver market to help us. Also, I didn't realize we were going to have a surprise guest from Traction. They were also a big part of helping us on our journey. I think they're partners here at the summit. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to honor them and honestly to look for more talent. All right, I'm going to start our story with results, because if you're a business person, this will matter to you. So these are 4 of our KPIs that we use in the event business. The first KPI, and the reason I chose this is everybody does this in a company. Every marketing department is sending out emails. So before we started this journey, it took us 1 to 2 weeks to make that process happen, to make one marketing email go out right to the right people. Sounds simple, but you'd be surprised. At the end of this journey, we got it down to 2 to 3 hours. The second KPI is something we measure. It's called audience development acquisition cost. We decreased that by 9%. We decreased our cost of sales by 18%. And we also decreased our cost of our systems. You would have thought that went up because we got onto some pretty expensive systems, but because we simplified, those costs went down by 22%. So I'm going to tell you this in the context of a story. When I first got to what was called Advanced Star at the time, it's now UBM Advanced Star, I went there as a consultant. And I went there to look at their order-to-cash processes. And, well, let me start with our transformation didn't start with a vision. It didn't start with something really fancy. It started with a problem. And our problem was we had implemented Salesforce. Who's ever heard of Salesforce? Right? And by the way, we're a sales and marketing company. That's pretty much what we do. We had implemented Salesforce, and instead of catapulting us into revenue generating, we were paralyzed. And so we had a problem. And it was in the journey of solving that problem that we moved into a digital transformation. So today I'm going to talk about how we solved the problem, not how we went from a vision, strategy, tactical deployment. Though I'd love to tell you that's the way we got there, but it's not. Okay, so when I got there, I was sitting amongst a group of salespeople, and they sell an event called Magic. It's one of the largest fashion events in the world. And it takes place in Las Vegas twice a year. And they couldn't move. They were coming over to me and saying, Rebecca, we can't use the Salesforce thing. It's the worst thing that ever happened to us. And at the time, I was reporting to the CEO, and I went back to the CEO, and I said, hey, I think you have a problem in that sales department. By the way, I didn't even know what Salesforce was at the time. And he said, no, Rebecca, it's a change management issue. Who's heard that before? Right? I thought, okay, fair enough. I've seen that myself. So went back, but this continued to happen, and it eventually started impacting the revenue. So he started paying attention. At one point, he said, okay, you can go look. And my background in my company is industrial engineering, so that's what we do. We look at business processes. One of Microsoft's ambitions is productivity in business processes. That's really all we do. So we went over there with our operations hat to the sales and marketing department and took operations toolbox with us, which included value stream mapping, business process reengineering. Anybody who knows Lean, we did some Kaizen events. And long story short, within 8 weeks, we found the root causes, relaunched Salesforce, and it was a huge success. That's actually just the beginning of the story. What we saw at that point was, wow, we just fixed Salesforce to work with our business processes, and our efficiencies went up immediately. What else can we do with this thing? So I went back to the executive team, and our journey began. We started with objectives. I won't go through all of these. I'm going to do number one, customer-centric. I know it sounds like a soundbite. Everybody says it. But this is truly what we put at the center of our strategy for our digital transformation. I'm going to go right into a how. So we're fortunate enough that we're in an event, right? BCTECH is an event. This is what our company does 100 times a year. What is one thing all of you experienced in coming to BCTECH? I bet you got an email. Did anybody not get an email? So this is a process, an event-based company that happens over and over and over again. It's a very important process. We found this is the process that took us 1 to 2 weeks just to create and get this, exporting data, importing data, segmenting content, artwork. Seems like it's not a big deal, but it is. So this is one of the first processes we knew we had to fix. And what we did is, step one, we went and we mapped every single step of the process, not high level, down to Susie walks over to Eddie to ask for a promo code. And then the promo code does this. And then we went back and we looked at every single step and we said, which one of those steps adds value to the customer? And if it does, make it green. Which steps do not add value to the customer? Make those red. It's as simple as that. And we went through, we calculated the non-value added steps, and 68% of our steps did not add value to our customer. So we knew we wanted to at least minimize those non-value added steps. It's a 2-page long document. This is what I'll go through what we came to a juncture. So in the value stream mapping process, we also saw huge bottlenecks. So with those bottlenecks, this is actually where the process meets the technology. Then we went out looking for technology, and we discovered marketing automation, things like Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot. So we saw marketing automation, and as engineers, we went back to the drawing table and said, okay, if we implemented something like Marketo, what would it do to our process? And when we did that, it came down to 1 page. And then these numbers at the top is not a calculation, it's the actual. When we actually implemented it, we thought it would knock it down to about a day. It knocked it down to 2 to 3 hours and moved our non-value added down to 41%. So you can see the simplicity. We went from 2 pages of steps to 1 page of step in this simple process. So keeping that in mind, that is one process that occurs in putting an event together. I bet the people, if anybody's in the room who does BCTECH, will agree with me on that, right? There's a lot of processes that happen in the back of the room. But to give you the whole concept of the life of an event, I like to tell a story on 1 page. So on the left side of the page is the beginning of the event. On the right side of the page is the end of the event. Magic, which happens twice a year, is the life cycle is 6 months at the bottom. For BCTECH, it's probably 1 year. And in an event, we have 2 customers. We have the exhibitor. So in fashion, the exhibitor are brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein, and they buy the booth. Right? They pay revenue. And that's where we get the bulk of our revenue. At BCTECH, I don't know if that's their model exactly, but the people out there exhibiting would be a customer. Our second customer is the attendee. That's you. So the people walking the floor. You attend the event. In a fashion event, it's the buyers. It's the dress buyer, the shoe buyer, Nordstrom's, Macy's, whatever department stores you have here, the buyer's there. So we started with looking at our 2 customers and putting them in the context of the event. And then we went back and we said, okay, before we start anything, what adds value to our customers? So in other words, why did you come to BCTECH? Why would you even bother? What adds value? We asked ourselves the question, there's multiple of them, but for this example, there's 2. The first one's called the introduction. That guy, the attendee, wants to meet that guy, the exhibitor. So me at BCTECH, I want to meet you, right? Hopefully you want to meet me, and you want to meet each other. So an event is about meeting each other. It's the introduction. And physically we do that at an event, but how could we help that digitally? How could we matchmake? The second value is content. Why else do you come to BCTECH? Especially this one, right? Content. You're here to learn something. You came to hoping you're going to leave this event with more knowledge to take back to your workplace. So before, we had a database for attendee and a database for exhibitor. I know it sounds crazy, but they were not in the same database. In fact, we had multiple databases. We decided we're going to put them both in our CRM. I'm not promoting Salesforce. It just happens to be the one that works for us, but that they both go into the same database to accomplish that first value, the introduction. And then we mapped, this is very high level, but the level you saw earlier, we mapped the life of an attendee. What, from cradle to grave, what does an attendee start with? It starts with marketing when we go and get the attendee and we take them through the process. So if you go back to that email campaign, that's one of those processes within here. It's in box 3 and 4. So we knew when we saw those 2 pages of red boxes, when we went and we implemented technology, we integrated Marketo to Salesforce, we did this direct integration. And that's how we got those KPIs you saw at the beginning. And by the way, everybody knows this is just not flicking on a switch, right? This took some real thought in doing it cleanly and trying. One of our principles is to stay as close to the native software as possible. Customization isn't actually that great, right, when you have to run a company because the changes. So we took that same concept, we implemented Marketo right on top of Salesforce, and then registration. You guys, you registered for the show. Seems pretty easy. In the back of our house, it was terrible. We used to export it to a third party, and then they would take care of our data and come back. The data was never reconciled, so it went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And actually, Imran designed this registration system. Now you get a QR code relative here. You go into Magic, 60,000 people. We used to have lines out the door. Now when you go to Magic, you fly right through. And that's, the registration system is right on top of Salesforce. When they pull their data, they're pulling their CRM data. It's not exporting and importing and having to reconcile data. We did this same process for the exhibitor, and we ended up integrating our floor planning tool. So in shows as big as ours, that Expo had those booths out on the floor. Somebody planned that out. They laid it out. And the last integration was Oracle, which Traction helped us with. So we have a fully integrated platform. This is our operating model. It is centralized around our customer. It's that simple. So with that in mind, these were the results of doing that. Again, I'd like to acknowledge BC. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome. And next, for our company, oh, I forgot to tell you this part. So when I worked at AdvanceStar, this was before UBM acquired us. We were actually growing through acquisition, like so many companies are today. So we were designing this model. Part of the strategy was to plug and play. If anybody does acquisitions, every time you buy a company, you inherit their legacy systems. You think you're going to leverage by consolidating your systems, but I think it's like 1 out of 5 acquisitions are actually successful in getting the results. So our concept was to create a plug-and-play model, and then we turn around. We were owned by a private equity group, and we got bought by UBM, which was in 2014. And this was a value play. So our platform was more advanced and integrated than UBM, which is a global company. So when they bought us, they came to me and my team and said, okay, we did a reverse integration. Instead of us integrating to their systems, we're now in London, and we're rolling this out globally for UBM. So it's pretty cool. And then across Americas is next. We just did Europe last year. It's going over really well. We're doing Americas, and we're also in Hong Kong, running across Asia. All right, thank you.
How many of you were at the conference last year? Can you believe the difference in how many more people are here and how much more technology is on display here? It's frankly incredible. So YVR has always been about supporting the community, and when I think about the technology that we can use to support our airport, there's so many options to buy locally. It's really exciting. I'm here to talk to you today about YVR's digital transformation. First, I'm going to give you a background about YVR in general. How many of you did fly through here to get here today? Good experience? Right on. Then I'm going to talk to you about what we're doing to create a perceptive airport, and then I'm going to finish to talk about what the future holds for us. So let's start with YVR itself. We're a non-for-profit, community-based organization. We take zero government funding, and we operate like a private organization. Any money that we make is reinvested back into the organization so that we can keep our costs low for both the airlines and passengers. We're committed to moving people, planes, and bags in a safe and efficient manner. And we have this culture of innovation at YVR that you can actually just chew on. Everybody looks for problems to solve and thinks about ways in their job and how they can solve things. YVR is the fastest growing and second largest airport in Canada, and last year we welcomed 22.3 million passengers. So that was about a 10% growth, and the growth just keeps coming. We win lots of awards, and we use technology and digital to be able to be leaders in our industry. And how many of you heard yesterday that we won the Skytrax Award again for the 8th year in a row for being the best airport in North America? It's awesome. It's quite something. We didn't think we were going to win again because it takes a lot, and it's unheard of to win 8 times in a row. So we're just thrilled about that. We are planners at YVR. We plan everything. We have a really clear strategies, and we understand how we want to meet those strategies through different objectives. And then we're using this concept of the perceptive airport to figure out how we're going to get there. So as the name implies, the perceptive airport anticipates needs through customization, personalization, and automation. So there's lots of airports that are using the term smart airport, but we actually don't use that term because I know a lot of smart people, but they're not actually all that perceptive. Have you experienced that? So a perceptive airport is about all of our stakeholders at the airport, and we have a lot of them. We have the passengers themselves, we have the airlines, we have our people that work there, we have contractors, we have tenants. All of those people need to know different information about what's going on at the airport. So how do we create that ecosystem for them to pass that information back and forth, all for the benefit for all those stakeholders? We also have huge sustainability targets. We're trying to decrease our carbon footprint at the airport, and so the perceptive airport is also helping us on that front. We have a lot of existing projects that we're doing, but I'm going to start with talking to you about the digital gateway. It's all about the data. You guys all know that, right? And you hear everyone saying it's about getting the right information to the right person at the right time. But we also think it's important to get it to the people on the right medium. Whether it's their phone, their iPad, their watch, it doesn't matter to us. We just want you to get the information. And so that's the basis for our digital gateway. It's YVR's API. It's a cloud-based solution that stores all of our facility and flight data in one location. It's that central source of the truth. And it enables all of our business intelligence needs, and it also allows us to get that information out to third parties as they need it. Our new website and app both run through the digital gateway, and they pull up key facility and flight information data to ensure that our users get that persistent and accurate presentation across all those mediums. But one of the cool initiatives that we're doing right now is around location analytics. So we're doing a pilot right now. We're using Wi-Fi and Halo technology, and it allows us to track devices, not people. So from a privacy perspective, we're not tracking a person carrying the device, just which devices are moving through the terminal. And that allows us to understand how passengers are using the terminal and where those choke points are. And then from that information, we can understand how do we use technology to address those choke points? How do we make that seamless transfer between when you arrive at the airport until you get to the gate? Another way that we're using location data is through a new partnership that we're doing with Apple. And like I said, we don't want to assume that people are using our app or our website. We don't care. We want you to get the information where you need it. So most people use map applications that are not our app. You use mostly your phones for it, right? So you use your iOS map application. So, but when you get into a building, whether it's a mall or a stadium or an airport, it's just a big blue dot. You can't get any information from what's happening inside of that location. So we're excited to work with Apple because you'll be able to get that information once you're inside the terminal, and you'll be able to find your way through the terminal just like you use GPS in your car. It's right on your phone. We also use the digital gateway to inform decisions for everyone's benefits. An example of how we do that is passengers who like to shop. I like to shop, right? We want to give them the opportunities based on the location of their aircraft, based on their airport gate. Where is that at? Duty free is our #1 revenue source over and above our fees that we get from the airlines, our aeronautical fees and charges. By promoting duty free, the money goes back from that into the airport and allows us to keep the cost of travel low for everyone in British Columbia. Through our business intelligence, we know which flights have a propensity to spend at duty free, and that shopping is just part of their travel experience. So we use that and we create pathways through the terminal so that they're routed through a duty free shop as they move from security to their gate. Now I'd like to talk to you about a part of the airport journey that's familiar to you all. You may have noticed something like this at the end of your journey. This is our Border Express kiosk. And a number of years ago, we decided that we needed an innovation to be able to handle the lineups at immigration. We did this because of the Olympics were coming. We knew that we would have a lot of congestion in the airport for the Olympics. So we wanted to free up passengers to spend more time relaxing, not waiting in lines to go through customs, and we also wanted to free up time for our customs staff to spend less time on their administrative tasks. We came up with the automated border control process, and we did it in conjunction with Canada Customs, and this self-service kiosk allowed entry for Canadian passport holders. It greatly sped up the border processing time, and we introduced this in 2008. And we even sold a few of them to Canadian airports. But after that, we built a new version called the automated passport kiosk, and this was for US Customs. We built the software right here in Richmond, and we got the hardware from Surrey. So buy locally, that's what we did. And we rolled it out in May of 2013. So we're a technology company on top of being an airport. These kiosks have been a huge success. We started selling them across the continent, and it caught the attention of many, many airports. We found that passengers now spend 33% less time waiting in their queue and 89% less time in the overall process of primary customs. They're now available in 33 airports and seaports across Canada, the US, and the Caribbean. And we've served over 100 million passengers doing this. So do the math on how much time we've saved the industry. It's phenomenal. They not only improve the customer experience, but they also generate that valuable aeronautical revenue for the airport, and that again keeps our fees low. We know that if we create something that works for us at the airport, it's going to work for other airports. We start by getting it right for us, and then we can market it. Our CEO likes to joke that the kiosk is like an iPhone. We always have to come out with new versions all the time. And so that's true. We are the world leader in self-service border kiosk technology, and we're constantly improving the product, opening it up to new markets and improving its features. We want to stay ahead of the competition, because there is competition in this world, and we want to generate more revenue for the airport. We'll soon release the newest version, which will complete the border processing for up to 96% of all travelers arriving at Canadian airports. So many more passports will be able to be processed through there. And this will really help us to meet our growth constraints, which will be a lot of growth in the next several years. We're going to use a lot of time-saving technologies in there, including biometric facial recognition and fingerprint scanning. They can be configured to meet the needs of almost every government, and meaning they will open new markets up to Canada, allowing us to improve border processing all around the world. So it's really a global business. Can't say a lot about the specifics of it yet. Some of you might have seen it on the trade show floor, but we're certainly going in the right direction, and we'll be announcing the specifics soon. Now I'll move to another type of kiosk. How many of you have seen these kiosks when you come into the airport? They're the check-in kiosks. Well, they're designed to be common use, which means that we can put any airline on these kiosks so that you can check in for any airline that you want. We recently developed some business intelligence around that help us understand how the carriers use these kiosks, if they're located in the right places, and what are they doing for peak times. We also learned that we printed 5 million boarding passes last year. So how many of you check in online on your mobile device? Wow. Okay, you are not typical. You're not typical at all. The adoption rate of mobile check-in is really quite low. And from this analytics data, we can now go back to the airlines and talk to them about changing their process, which helps us from a congestion point of view of check-in. And it also helps us to decrease our footprint from a sustainability point of view, because we're not printing so much paper. So it's a win-win. Here's another one that we're doing, which is something you might not typically think of, but we're deploying technology around taxi use and compliance dashboard. And this was actually created, remember how I said that you can almost chew on innovation at YVR? We actually encourage people to pitch their ideas of innovation, and this is an idea from one of our staff members. He developed this in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, the first version of it. He used agile methodology to do it. And the taxi cabs or companies are contractually required to do so many trips to the airport. So that makes sure that when you get off your plane, you actually have a cab there if you want one. So they have to do so many trips through a month. So each of those dots represents a specific cab. And so the dispatcher gets a view of how many of their cabs are in compliance with the number of trips that they have to make. And then through the month, they actually more of them will move into the green. But the dispatcher can say, okay, you have to go and do more trips. But do you remember how I said that we want to get it to the right people on the right medium? So it's great that the dispatchers have it, but our next iteration will be around creating an app for the actual drivers of the cabs so that they know that they need to do some more trips for compliance. So it's just an evolving process, a great example of how we're using business intelligence. But what about the future? So Border Express and the Taxi Cab app present successful solutions for everyday issues in the airport. But what about that whole journey? We're going through massive growth at the airport. How are we going to handle that from a capacity point of view? And that was one of the themes that YVR discussed through the development of our 20-year master plan, which we called YVR 2037. We have an ambitious plan to grow to 25 million passengers by 2020. And we are really far ahead of where we thought we'd be at this stage. So that's really exciting. But the thing is, the terminal is almost at capacity. So we have to build out. We have to build more terminal. We have to do a lot of things in our build. And that's what the master plan was identifying, is where we're going to do that growth. And the perceptive airport that I talked about earlier is a big part of that master plan. We've just finished the third consultation phase for the plan, and we've received some really key feedback from the community on what they want in the terminal. So that's been really good for us. So now I'm going to run a video that we've used to help people understand what we're doing in the master plan, but I specifically want you guys to look for all the technology that's shown in here of what could be in the future.
Plans for the future of YVR are taking shape. Our 2037 master plan is a blueprint for an airport that'll continue to reflect the best of BC. Sustainable, welcoming, and diverse. YVR will be a feast for the senses, a hive of activity and interaction, a business hub for entrepreneurs, and a unique retail experience that is second to none. Help shape the future of our world-class sustainable airport by attending public meetings and sharing your input online.
So I already had someone downstairs approach me because they want to build those robots that they see in there. So that's great, right? Under our new master plan, we say that digital will be the way we do things. It's how we're going to implement this whole growth that we're having. So one of the initiatives that we have is the District Energy Project. And so this project is really going to leverage IoT. We have the largest building in British Columbia. I don't know how many of you knew that or not, and that presents some opportunities and challenges. There's the old sections, there's new builds. How do you make sure that your energy use is efficient in a building of that size? You use IoT and you use building management systems to monitor and control energy use across all of Sea Island. So that's what we're going to do. We start building this this year next to the parkade, and we're going to put all of YVR's energy needs under one roof. It'll be centrally located, and it will be that nerve center to monitor and control how energy is used across all those systems. And it's also going to help us achieve our sustainability targets because it's going to feature a geo-exchange plant. So that was district energy, but what about the actual terminal expansions? So right now, this is a rendering of what Pier D is going to look like. And Pier D is an expansion that we're doing on the international terminal. So we're right into the planning stages of it right now. It's going to have new gates for that will fit A380, so the big gates, stores, space. And as part of the design phase, we're working to understand how are we going to use IoT in this new terminal. We've already integrated a lot of our systems for lighting and HVAC, but what about the bridges? So you know when you go from the terminal onto the plane, you go through that little, it's called a bridge. And that bridge is actually one of the most expensive assets that we have at the airport. So how do we SCADA up or sensor up those bridges to understand from a maintenance point of view or what those bridges are doing, where they're located? How do we use IoT to manage those? We're also thinking about using it for waste systems because we have to decrease the amount of waste and potable water consumption, normal water consumption. All of these things will be thought of in Pier D. This will be the new model of how we do all of the construction at YVR. Construction project, technology project, one thing now. They are not separate. When you land at YVR, it kind of feels like you're coming home to BC. Right? We have this phenomenal sense of place, and it's been by design that we have a terminal that just feels like BC. It's always been that way. So as we're building out the terminal, and we're thinking about digital signage, and we're thinking about projection technology, how do we bring that sense of place into that world? So that'll be part of Pier D as well. So trust me, when this opens in a few years, you're just going to be wowed by how we're using technology into this new construction project. So that was all about the actual building, but what about your journey through the terminal, right? You have a lot of pain points right now, you have to wait in lines. What could that look like in the future? So the ultimate is that seamless customer experience. And so we have a couple of projects that we're working on right now, but we also have some great ideas on projects that we will create in the future. So for instance, you arrive at YVR, you go into the parkade, and your license plate is scanned, and it does a quick check, and it opens up the gate. And then a program guides you to a stall that's open instead of driving around and driving around. You actually can get to where you need to go. After you park, your smartphone gives you a guided journey. You get checked in automatically, because we already know who you are. And then you drop off your bag, because we're developing some new technology around self-tag bag drop, so that's easy. And then you proceed straight through security, just a breeze. And on the way, the Perceptive Airport's going to give you information about shops, places to eat, where you can relax, different entertainment that you can have, or any deals that are happening in the airport. When you drop off your bags, it kind of goes along that conveyor and then it goes into a black hole. Have you ever wondered what happens? Well, underneath the airport, there's this labyrinth of conveyor systems that is going on. And we actually just replaced the system and upgraded it. And so we now can move any bag from any point in the terminal to another point in the terminal in half an hour, which is fantastic. But what if in the future you knew, as you're going through the airport and as you're getting on the plane, your bag is with you? It tells you, don't worry, your bag's on the plane. It's going to get there just fine. That'd be nice peace of mind for you, right? So that would be a good thing to happen in the future. But as you proceed through the terminal, you go through immigration. You can pre-clear at YVR for different countries. We have the newest facial recognition kiosk, and then you're able to enjoy that art and architecture that YVR is known for. And behind the scenes, we're gaining all kinds of data that we need to continue to improve that passenger experience. Sound fantastic? So this actually is a picture of a security screening in 1973 and a security screening that happens today. What other area of the airport is exactly the same? There is nothing in the way in terms of technology. For everything that I talked about for the future, that's available today. But we need to change mindsets as well. So that's part of our role at YVR, is to help change those mindsets with different organizations that we work with, all while keeping it safe and secure in the airport. So we're working on that. So I'm really excited to be part of the airport. I've been with them for less than a year. It's just been an amazing journey. Lots of planes, which is really cool. And we're going to be using more and more technology in the coming years. And when I look at the amount of technology we're going to be able to leverage right here at home, it's just phenomenal. And so I'm looking forward to when we get to the Q&A, if you have any ideas of what we can do better at the airport or how we can leverage technology, I can't wait to hear it. Thank you very much.
I fly a lot, and YVR is absolutely brilliant. Like, having the perspective of having the opportunity to see airports around the world, it is such a relief and a treat to land there after being around in different places. And I think you can sometimes take it for granted how brilliant that place is. But I think you could see from that last presentation, like, how this happens, is that it's not by accident. You have people with a vision of the way they want things to be, and then they don't stop until they make it real. And then we all benefit from it. So I just wanted to say that, I love the airport. And I want to use that as a segue to what I'm going to talk about. So I know a lot of you. I've been in the BC technology sector for about 20 years, beginning as a graduate student in physics at UBC and then transitioning into founding D-Wave, which many of you have probably heard about. It's a company that had the vision of creating the world's first quantum computers that you could buy. And that vision, in many ways, I felt like, when we first started, it was overly ambitious. I kept that to myself. But, it was one of these things where you see the future in a certain way. And that future is not the way it is now, maybe vastly different. And then you have to convince other people, bring them into your circle of influence, and build a team that builds the thing that you're thinking of in your mind. And so it was largely successful. It was very, very difficult. But a process that I used over and over there that I'm going to tell you about now, which maybe you can use too, is a thing that we call science fictioning. So you saw 2 examples of it just today in this room. One of them was the vision of the future that was presented about YVR. 2037 sounds like the future, doesn't it? It sounds like, where we're going to have flying cars and robots and all that. But it's only 20 years away. And the other one was the vision that Microsoft showed us about the way that they wanted the world to be. So this process is super important when you're doing technology startups. And the way it works is this. So you believe something about the future that might be controversial. Maybe other people don't believe it. Maybe it's something that you view it as being like science fiction or overly ambitious. If you can articulate, not in the context of the everyday reality that we're sitting in now, but in the context of a science fiction story, what the future looks like for you, then that can become a guide for other people to understand what you're talking about. So in the case of D-Wave, the science fiction story went something like this. In 1999, when the company was founded, there were no quantum computers. And for those of you who don't know, a quantum computer is not just a faster computer. It's a computer that taps into physics at a very deep level, potentially, although this is still controversial, by manipulating the resources in parallel universes. Yeah, so that sounds kind of weird, but it's consistent with our most fundamental language that we use to describe nature, which is quantum mechanics. So it's possible that these machines actually do use resources that are not in what we would usually consider to be our universe in order to perform computation. So that aside, they're very, very difficult to build. They're very fragile. And back in 1999, building one at scale for commercial use, totally out of the question. So the future that we proposed was one where anybody could access one of these machines at any time. They were commonplace, and they were being used to do things that were beyond the scope of what you could otherwise do. There would be no computer that you could build that were of the conventional variety that would be able to do the things these things can do. And they would open up all sorts of vistas for people and doing all sorts of things, everything from basic science to bookkeeping and everything in between. So that future has not yet been realized, but we've taken major steps along the path. So that was an intro to Kindred. So Kindred has a vision that I'm going to paint like a science fiction story. So today, excepting movies, we have no robots like us. There is no David from Prometheus. There's no Data from Star Trek. There are no robots at all that have ever been built that are even remotely like even an animal. The way that robots are built now, they're not that different than the toaster or a car. They're a piece of dumb machinery that translates commands that we tell them to run into actions. We can create the illusion that they're smart or doing something, they do things that are interesting. But there's some fundamentally different thing about your cat or you than any of these machines that have ever been built. So here's the science fiction story. Let's say in 2037, when the YVR plan is come online fully, we have machines amongst us that are virtually indistinguishable from us. All right? So we have built engineered systems, robots if you will, that in any essential way that you would consider would be human. So I'm not asking you right now to think about what the likelihood of that is. That's a separate issue. What we're talking about now is a science fiction future, and I want you to imagine what the world would be like if one or more companies had the technology to build such a machine, and let's say it cost $100 to do it. What would change? And if you think about this a little bit, you're going to have some ideas. And then if you think about it a little bit more, you're going to have more ideas. And if you think about it a lot, what you will realize is that the transformation that would happen, not only to human civilization, but the entire world, has no historical peer. There is nothing that has ever been invented, including the steam engine, the invention of written language. None of those things would affect human civilization as much as this event. It would quite literally cause an entire change in everything we do. You have a job. Even if you don't have a job, you have hobbies. There's things you love to do. Imagine if that $100 machine could do what you do, but better, and never sleeps. So now your employer has a decision to make. Are they going to employ you to do the work that you do, or are they going to employ a machine? Okay, so this future, depending on who you are, sounds marvelous and wonderful, and it can also sound terrifying. And I think that it's just a true fact that the development of fundamentally transformative technologies have good sides and bad sides. There's no utopian future here, but it's also not a dystopia. The scenarios of the Terminator and the Matrix are ridiculous and will never happen, but it's not going to be all roses either. I don't see a Star Trek future ahead of us. So partly what I want to do here is just plant the seed, because it's going to take a while for this stuff to come online, but I can tell you that it's going to happen. These machines that I'm talking about are coming, and it's just a matter of when. If I was pressed to give a timeline, I think that there will be questions about the legal status of machines within 20 years, where there are going to be arguments for giving them property rights and so on. So think about that. Now, okay, that's the vision, science fictioning. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we actually do. So you may have seen our display downstairs. This doesn't look like it's going to take your job anytime soon. But I'm going to tell you about why this thing is a thing. So it has nothing to do with the robot, first of all. So you're looking at a little cat guy. It's kind of cute. You can scritch it. But the main thing to think about in the way that Kindred and others are attacking the problem of what is sometimes called general intelligence or artificial general intelligence is at its surface an extremely simple proposition. It's that a thing like this, a bundle of sensors and actuators, can be imbued with something that we would think of as a mind. All right, so let me roll that back a little bit. So a sensor is something like a camera or a microphone or little pads on the feet that measure whether they're stepping, like skin sensors. It can be other things too, like sensing carbon dioxide levels or whatever. A sensor is anything that tells you something about the environment. An actuator is something like a motor, something that moves, but it can also be something like a speaker or something more abstract, like sending signals on the internet to, for example, order parts for a replacement for it. The mind, using the term loosely, is a piece of software that takes the perception system, like all of the information that's flowing into the robot, and it converts it into action. So if I have, let me use this as an example. So I've got a robot down there. Now, if I were to close my eyes and walk over here and try to find it, it would be difficult for me. So my mind has to take actions that are different than if I could look at it. So when you perceive things, it affects how you move. It's kind of obvious when you think about it. So the merit of a mind is that it moves the body better. So a better mind moves the robot better. What does better mean? So in the types of systems we build, which are called reinforcement learning systems, better means whatever you decide it to be. So if you decide that you want better to mean this robot will learn how to, say, walk, the way that you consider programming this machine, although programming is probably the wrong word, is to define what you want the robot to do, but not how. And then the robot becomes like a little scientist. It starts exploring its world. It'll move its foot a little bit, it'll touch things, it'll look around, it'll hear things, and by so doing, it gains more and more information about the world around it, which allows it to make better decisions on how to accomplish its goal. So this paradigm of how to build machines is new. Nearly everybody who builds robots controls them via either telling the robot exactly what to do and in what order, or by controlling them with remote control. These robots don't work that way. These robots discover the basis of what good movement means via experimentation in the world. The actions that they take affect their environment. That then is sensed, and then the mind decides whether or not the action that was taken is good or bad for accomplishing the task that we've decided is important. You can, I was talking yesterday with somebody whose wife is a behavioral scientist who studies animals and was remarking that what I'm describing is very much like the way people think about animal cognition, and that's not a coincidence. The whole field of reinforcement learning has its roots in animal behavior science. How do animals, usually non-human ones is the way that's thought of, how do they learn? Because they do. And this process of exploring and then either getting a reward or a punishment for the action that you've taken is a very important part of how all animals learn. By the way, most AI research is done absent a body. So leading AI researchers like DeepMind and OpenAI and Google Brain don't generally use robots because it's hard. But the perspective that we take is that every entity that has ever existed in the history of the world that we would consider intelligent has a body, all of them. And then you can ask the question, why? And people know this. This is a very easy thing to answer from a biological perspective. Animals evolved brains to control their bodies. That's what brains are for. If you ask the question, why does a creature have a brain? The reason is they need to move because predators are coming and food is over there, and you need to have a system that converts all of your information about the world into a choice. And if you make a bad choice and you move towards the predator or away from it, your genes are exiting the gene pool. And what happens is that control systems that evolve to be able to perceive things well and act intelligently, physically move well, survive. So all of the wonders of human civilization, all of the beautiful things that we've done and built, they all come from, they're a symptom of an underlying cause, which is that your evolutionary ancestors, tracing all the way back to the primordial ooze, needed to learn how to move their bodies better. So we take that very seriously, and we build, all of the AI that we build is in machines. I'm just going to close by telling you a little bit about how we use this in practice. So these robots are just simple things. They take about a day to build. We did them for the show in order to match the specifications of the beautiful little enclosure that was built for us. The commercial side of the business uses the exact same software that I've been talking about, same procedure, but it does it for a robot that has one arm, one gripper, and works inside what's called an e-commerce distribution center. So in these places, they're warehouses filled, in our case, with clothing. And the robot learns, by that process I just described, to reach into a bin, pull out a piece of clothing, which is usually in a bag, barcode scan it, and then put it into an output cubby, which is sometimes called a put wall. These kinds of machines can take on a task that right now humans perform, but it's a terrible job. It's repetitive, it's high stress. People are measured by their throughput, and the ones that aren't doing fast enough get demoted. So this machine, this is an example, of how I think the future should go, is that machines that do tasks that I think humans should not do will flourish. And the kinds of things that humans enjoy doing and would do even if you weren't being paid, those will flourish too. Like, I think that the metric for thinking about the future of work is, would you do your job if you weren't being paid for it? And those kinds of jobs, I think, will flourish and survive. The ones that nobody really wants to do are going to go away. So the first commercial product that Kindred is about to launch is a machine that does that particular task inside e-commerce distribution centers. But the important part, I think, is that it's all the same software. The same software that runs on these guys that allowed them to learn how to walk is the same software that runs on this giant industrial robot that learns how to recognize objects, pick them up, and put them in different places. All right, I'll stop there. Thanks, and everybody who came to the booth, thanks a lot. And I'd also like to thank there are some Kindred people who aren't usually used to doing booth kinds of things, but have done a good job. So thanks, everybody.
All right, that was terribly interesting and not as creepy as I thought. So Geordie, thanks. I think there's lots more to discuss on that topic. We've got some time for questions for Ryan, Rebecca, Lynette, and Geordie. There is a mic roaming around here, over there, right now. So please ask away. We've got about 10 minutes or so for questions. Does anybody? Oh, can you just say who it's for also?
Yeah, it's for Geordie. So in spite of the various sort of controversy around D-Wave, I know you've got systems deployed in the United States with, I can't remember them all, but Google, NASA, et cetera. Can you, is it possible, if it's not classified, can you describe the kinds of activities that your systems are involved in with those bodies?
At Kindred, you mean?
No, I'm sorry. I'm going back to the D-Wave. The D-Wave systems that have gone into organizations, and I'm just wondering if you can talk about the kind of activity that they're engaged in and how that's going.
They are all related to machine learning and optimization. The systems perform an exotic form of machine learning that is very good at certain kinds of tasks. And the work breaks up into classified military research on one hand and commercial activity from people like Amazon and Google on the other hand. The commercial activity is the sorts of things that big web properties do with machine learning. There's a long list, but they're essentially about extracting some kind of actionable information from data, either on the advertising side or from data processing stuff like computer vision, speech recognition, that kind of stuff. We don't get to know what the classified stuff is.
Hi, this is a message or question for Lynette. What was interesting for me was seeing the two images from 1973 and then today, which hasn't changed much at all. Given what's happening around the world with security, especially in airports, how do you see that changing, and how do you see the Vancouver airport being sort of the lead here when it comes to maintaining security at the airport and making sure people who are going through that turnstile are those people? I know you talked about facial recognition. I know we're probably a little ways away from that, from being like it being a reality of capturing people, but maybe you can just give us your vision about how long that might take to actually implement worldwide.
Well, I think it's a great question, because from a technology point of view, you are who you are, and it's all about identity, being able to identify who a person is. And then the second part is that what are you carrying through with you? And there are technologies that are not invasive, that you don't have to walk through something to find out what that is. So I use that example specifically because it is about changing mindsets and you know, the government agencies that have to be able to adopt this stuff, they have to be very comfortable that they are providing the security that is so important. I mean, that is what our business is. And so, you know, when, I think it's going to be how they want to adopt those technologies, probably you know, more of a crawl, walk, run kind of approach. We are thinking about doing some pilots with certain areas. You see different applications of it in the U.S. and how security is done in the U.S. versus the trusted traveler programs that are in there. So that's sort of the starting point of it. So hard to say when it will be actually come true, but the technology is there now, and that's part of what we do. We do a lot of work in Ottawa and working with people, and it is working with them, because we do have to have that comfort at the end of the day that the security is there. It's paramount.
Hi, my question is from Lynette. Great job in YVR. I have been traveled to YVR since 2004. The first time I was a 20 years old student travel here. So I wanted to know what are the channels you have come up with so far to first share the issues you are facing and you are looking for a solution, and also what channels you have set up to hear the ideas which you might not come up with, but someone, a passenger, someone from community can share it with you. So what are those?
Yeah, we have a number. So the question is about how do we get information or ideas from the community? So we have a number of ways. You know, we're always, we do a lot of meetings out there. We did a whole plan of consultation with the YVR 2037 plan. So we were out in the community. I can't, Andrea's here. She probably knows how many meetings we did out in the community to get feedback. But just contact us at any time, and we want to know what our community thinks. We are community-based. It's your airport. And so we want to hear those ideas of how we can make the airport better. And that has been our success for, you know, for us, is that we make the airport for the community. And we reinvest any of our profits back into the airport. So you've paid for the airport. And, you know, as we go forward, it's about getting your ideas and incorporating them into our designs.
My question's for Geordie. Geordie, I think you and J.J. Abrams would probably have a lot to talk about. I wanted to ask about the challenges that your team has faced around ethics and responsible decision making, and what's the source that you use for that for your machines, and are you kind of writing the rules on it?
Yeah, so the ethics of the future when it comes to relationships between these new kinds of machines and people is exceedingly complicated, I'd say. So everything that you do in this kind of field has long-term consequences, and you have to think carefully about the decisions that you make. I think one of the things that, there's obviously a lot of work on this, and we follow it. Everything up to the President Obama's administration did a lot of work on trying to figure out what this means for the future of work, which is one aspect of this. The one thing that I think we've added to the debate is that we think a lot about this from the perspective of the machines. So we fully intend to succeed at this, and one of the consequences of success is that machines will have self-models. You know, they'll feel things the same way maybe we do, and that has consequences. So when you think about the future of owning machines, you don't have to do too much of a mental leap to think that that's something like slavery if those machines have certain properties. So while I think it's early days, we do think an awful lot about it. We also think a lot about the safety concerns. So the way that we build these things right now, they try to learn to do whatever you tell them is good, and that is a double-edged sword. It gives you the flexibility to learn all sorts of things, everything from picking things out of bins to walking to speaking and all that. But also opens the door to allowing them to learn things that are antisocial. So this is one of these circumstances where the choices you make as a developer of technology have trade-offs. You know, in one sense, it's better to be a general learning machine because you don't want to shut things off from its capabilities. But on the other hand, there are certain kinds of things that you don't want machines to learn how to do. And how to navigate that is a tricky business, and I don't have any easy answers.
Thank you. It was very inspiring thought. Do you believe that a machine going to have consciousness at a certain time? Do they have a compassionate?
I assume that question is for me.
Yes. Do they have compassionate? Are they going to be in love or?
Right. So there is a place for something like consciousness in the way that these machines work. And it's actually kind of dry and technical, that when a machine creates a model of the world, it also creates a model of itself, because the type of actions you take depend an awful lot on knowing that you're different than the rest of the world. So if you touch a stove, that's a very different proposition than if you put something on the stove. One of them is you and the other one isn't you. So these machines, as a side effect of being good at what they do, need to learn that they are different than the rest of the world. And that leads to something like a self-model, which you can think of as consciousness, an understanding that you're separate than the rest of the world and have your own separate properties. Now, whether or not we describe that, the word that we usually use, consciousness, I'm not sure, but there is a technical way in which there are answers to these kinds of questions that emerge from this kind of work. But going to the other point about whether these things actually feel things like joy and suffering and pain, and we have numbers that we track within them that we call those things that are meant to mimic what we mean in a biological creature by something like pain. So for example, when these guys touch a surface, these whiskers register a signal that says, please stop doing that, I don't like it. So what's happening in the mathematics of the system is it's trying to stop that from happening again. The question of whether or not they actually feel pain, I don't think they do right now, but you might imagine that their descendants, where the systems become a lot more complex and mature, do actually have a self-model where they do feel something like pain or joy or suffering or love or whatever these things happen to be. My point of view on all of this is that there's nothing special about humans as a type of machine. We obviously have superpowers like language and ability to dexterously manipulate things that are better than anything else that's evolved on Earth. But I don't think that all of the stuff that makes us who we are is so mysterious that we can't understand it and then build machines that are like us in any ways we care to. It's going to take a while, but you know, I don't see any reason why it won't happen at some point.
Okay, so this kind of starts with Ryan and then perhaps a different perspective from Geordie. So Microsoft's mission of helping people achieve more, what do we do in a world constrained by resources when perhaps we can't always achieve more? And might be an interesting perspective considering AI.
In a constrained world?
My mind leads to constrained natural resources.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a pretty broad question. I think we purposely left the deep details of what we mean by achieving more very broad. So we do include an organization to achieve more, whatever they define that to be. And then same thing on a personal level. I mean, if you look at Microsoft, it spans the commercial business, but also the consumer world, right? So the big one for us was really, hey, whatever you self-define to mean achieving more to you as a person, as an individual, or an organization, we really wanted to provide a platform and tools and means for someone to do that. I think in a constrained world, that's what's actually quite exciting is when you look at things like biotech and digital transformation of governments, public services, and so on. A lot of that is squarely aimed on clean technology and those types of things. Well, We need to iterate very, very quickly. We need to collaborate. We need to share ideas. That's really all about digital transformation. So I think, like Geordie was saying earlier, anything that we're going to talk about kind of broadly in computing kind of has pros and cons depending on what you're defining achieving your means could be. I think that's just human nature, or maybe robot nature as well. But yeah, I actually tend to have a more positive view on that based on what we're seeing, people running up to these constraints, but then also, you know, hey, how do we understand these models better? How do we empower people to do something about them? And then, yeah, how do we use science to really work within these constraints? I don't know if I directly answered your question, but.
So a lot of these very interesting questions are so complicated. There's no real way to answer them. You know, like the Earth and all of its resources, both physical and digital, and increasingly, our rapid understanding of things changes things on a daily basis. I mean, all you have to do is look out in the lobby out there. You know, none of that stuff existed 10 years ago. Like all the robots that you're seeing, that would have been like some underground facility in Virginia, and even then it wouldn't have been that good. And now you've got high school kids. So I had this guy come up to me today who is a grade 12 student who was asking me detailed questions about like real-time operating systems and reinforcement learning. Like, I didn't even learn those words until I was 35 and had done a PhD and all that. Like, all the advances that are happening are so fast that anytime anybody asks a complex question about the future, if somebody tells you something with certainty, I mean, they're not telling you the full truth. The answer to almost every question that's complicated about the future now is, you can have a desire for a certain outcome. Like, everybody wants us to live in abundance where we solve problems that have to do with limited physical resources and all that, but nobody really knows how to do it. And I would say that the technology industry as a whole, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, the types of people who are in the tech industry, I think, are generally thinking a lot about social good, even though it sometimes doesn't look that way. From the press sometimes casts tech people as being a little bit elitist and away from the mainstream of concerns, and especially in the United States. But I actually don't think that's true. I think that a lot of people in tech think a lot about the impact that their innovations are having on the world and are attempting to do good. It's just that it's hard to know. Like, if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you do something, it's going to have long-lasting ramifications in a very complex system, and you just don't know what the outcome is going to be. Even if you want the best possible thing to happen, you just don't have control.
All right, let's give a big round of applause to our speakers.
Thanks.